I found myself thinking a lot about my seminary experience these days. And I think it probably has something to do with the fact that I have never loved and hated a place so much at the same time before as I have with that place. Which is why I think I'm still processing it all, even 2 years later after graduating. But to focus on the positive, and there were a lot of positives. One of the things that really makes this seminary special is that it has a really kind of like a Benedictine type of vibe to it. And if you're not familiar, the Benedictine monastic tradition, it revolves around 3 things: work, study, and prayer. So our formation for the priesthood also revolved around these 3 things. And this is what makes this school really unique compared to other seminaries across the world. As a student there, you're not just in a classroom studying theology or the Bible all day long. Like, we did that too, of course, but more was required of us than just head knowledge. Prayer and work were also essential for our formation. So we had to go to chapel twice a day, at least 5 days a week. So this meant that we spent nearly 2 hours in prayer together most days. That has a way of shaping you. Additionally, all of us had different types of jobs on campus. Some worked the grounds, others in the library, and some assisted professors. But my job was by far the best. You see, I was a refectorian. It sounds awfully impressive, doesn't it? Well, you should be impressed. In fact, many people outside of my little seminary bubble acted quite impressed whenever I proudly boasted that I was a refectorian. To be fair, they didn't actually know what that word meant. So what else were they to do but act as impressed with me as I was with myself, right? But whenever they found out that the word refectorian is basically just a fancy Episcopalian word for that guy who does the dishes, let's just say they weren't quite so impressed anymore. So one day in seminary, while I was doing the dishes, the most sacred duty of a refectorian, one of my classmates walked up and he asked me a question that I hadn't given much thought to. I probably should have by this point, but I hadn't. He asked me, TJ, what would happen if after 3 years of seminary, you have to go for 3 years, and all of the money and the time that you have invested into becoming a priest, and after all of the ordination interviews and all of the hoops that you have to jump through for the diocese, what would happen if in the end the bishop decided not to ordain you? Basically, what would happen if the bottom came falling out of this whole project, right, that you've been working on? The answer that came out of my mouth that day, I think, surprised me as much as it surprised him. I told him that I would be very happy to be rejected. And in fact, it would actually be quite liberating to not become a priest. You see, to explain, I felt the call to holy orders whenever I was 18 years old, specifically on my Christmas break during my senior year of high school. That's how long I have sensed a call to holy orders. And for most of my adult life, I'm 36 now, I haven't been able to imagine myself doing anything else. My identity was completely bound up with this sense of calling, with this vocation. If I am not a minister, then who am I? In that moment, though, as I was scrubbing sriracha sauce off of plates, I noticed that something within me, somewhere along the way, had shifted. And I realized in that moment that I really could go and do something else and be incredibly happy. I don't have to become a priest in order to be happy. I don't have to be a minister at all in order to be happy. I had found my happiness in another source. And I realized that if the Episcopal Church never had me as one of its priests, it would turn out to be just fine. And that if the kingdom of God never had me as another ordained person within it, it would go on to be just fine. It was really liberating, realizing that I am not needed, right? That there's something about my vocation that is expendable. Now, don't get me wrong. I love being a priest. I especially love being a priest here with these dear people. And I still feel truly called. I know I am called. I know I'm doing the right thing. And I always knew, even back then when that question was posed to me, that things would work out. I had faith that I was going to be ordained. I just knew it. But I will tell you that there is something incredibly freeing in learning how to just let go, and finding some level of detachment from all of the important plans that you make for your life, and in being truly open to all of the ways in which life could possibly unfold for you. In fact, throughout the course of my lifetime, I have learned that God's dreams are way, way bigger than any of the dreams I ever could have imagined for myself. So those times that I have clung to things, clung to my own concrete plans for how everything is supposed to work out, those times where I have sought to force my life into going down a certain path, those are the times where they've been by far the hardest and the unhappiest seasons of life for me. But whenever I've given myself permission to let go, and when I let the Spirit of God lead me into the great unknown, those, my friends, are the seasons where everything seems to come together with incredible ease and simplicity. Those seasons where I detach, where I'm open, those are the seasons where the seemingly impossible becomes possible. Those are the seasons where joy always has a way of finding me and permeating like everything. My friends, there's great freedom to be had in learning that you are not God, and that as much as you might want to be the master of your own destiny, your destiny is never something you're going to be able to master. You can grab at the cool summer breeze, hoping to capture it, hoping to contain it, hoping to control it. Or you can simply appreciate it for what it is, as its coolness glides across your face and off the back of your neck. And you can grasp at the gentle waters in your hands, hoping to possess the river. Or you can simply let yourself float along with the stream. I heartily agree with one of history's greatest mystics, perhaps the greatest mystic, whenever he said that detachment, the art of non-clinging, the art of letting go, detachment is the highest of all the virtues. He said it is higher by far than love, soaring even higher than humility. Why? Because you can love God and never let him love you. You can be humble and humble yourself before God, but you can never understand just how much he has humbled himself before you. Whenever you learn the art of detachment, however, the art of letting go, the art of simply letting things be, you truly open yourself up to God's grace. You learn how to let yourself be loved by God. You learn how to rest in God's resting in you. It is this wisdom of detachment that lies at the heart and center of Jesus' teaching today. In our gospel reading, Jesus tells two parables. One is about a farmer growing crops, and the other is about a tiny mustard seed growing to become a sizable plant. Both parables are about the planting of seeds and the growing of those seeds. While one parable focuses more on the stages of the growth, the other focuses more on how other creatures, birds, find their rest on the branches after the growth has happened. The central teaching, there's many things you can pluck from both of these parables, and rightfully so. But there is one clear central teaching to both of these parables. The central teaching for both parables is that the growth, it happens all on its own. The kingdom of God is like someone scattering seed on the ground, and they go to sleep and then rise night and day, and the seed would sprout and grow, but the sower does not know how. And before you know it, the tiny mustard seed has grown into the greatest of all shrubs. The point is that the kingdom of God will grow all on its own. That's just what it does. We don't grow the kingdom, God does. All we have to do is learn how to get out of the way of this growth, to simply let it be what it is in our midst. In fact, in these parables, like the crops would have grown regardless of the farmer's influence. The mustard seed would have grown into a shrub regardless of whether or not the birds of the air ever nested in its branches. It's not about what we do or what we don't do. It's all about what God does within us. The kingdom of God is planted within us, and we only come to actualize it whenever we stop trying to plant the kingdom of God within us. We only grow spiritually whenever we stop trying to grow spiritually, whenever we detach ourselves from any and all desire for spiritual progress. We must even detach ourselves from the desire for detachment. If you have ears, then hear. We must stop clinging to the desire to be not clingy. The kingdom of God comes in its fullness whenever we realize that we don't want to be anywhere other than where we are right now in this moment, because it is only in the now, in this exact moment, where the fullness of God is available to us. The past is gone and the future is not yet. What matters is not where you have come from, where you've been, or where it is that you think you are going. But what matters is where you are right now in this present moment, because it is this exact moment and no other moment where the fullness of God is rushing to greet you and to transform you. And detachment occurs whenever we stop trying to recreate the past, and whenever we stop wishing for a greater peace for tomorrow, and when we start living into the fullness of the gift of this present moment that we have right now. So learn from the wisdom of the farmer that it's not about trying to grow the kingdom of God, but it's about bringing our awareness to how the kingdom of God will blossom with or without us. Learn from the wisdom of the birds that the kingdom of God is not about the growing of the shrub, but it's about resting in its branches.